All right, so what we're doing is we're getting ready to make our cutting boards. And what I do is cut butcher blocks.
What you say, a cloud of dust?
Well, a cloud of dust. And there's unfortunately, well, here's the thing. One of the hardest things to do when you're doing a lot of woodworking is changing from machine to machine. It's really the setup that takes the most amount of time. And so I actually have my portable table saw here that I use on the job site. Well, I've got my table saw over here set up for my dados because I do a lot of that. So unless I have to do a lot of like really big sheet goods, it's easier just to take the little table saw and pop it up here, create a mount of sawdust because it's not hooked up to the dust collector, and I guess I could hook up a port. That's what I need to do. Thank you guys. Is basically put another blast gate on here so I can put a hose in there and suck that up. But it's real quick for me to go ahead and have this cut for my blanks, and then I still have my dados when I'm doing something else. So what I've done, you see 2 inches, 2 1/8 inch thick. That's oak, right? Excuse me, walnut right there. We have some mahogany here, and we have cherry. Along with, I have other ones over here that I had cut before that are longer. I'm walking kind of gingerly because I had knee surgery yesterday. And before you guys give me a hard way to go and say, what are you doing out there working? Doctor says I do need to try and move around some so that way you don't get blood clots from the scope. So that's where I'm in here, just kind of setting this up and just getting these glued up. One of you great fans is actually in town, Tony Douglas, and he said she wants to get one. Well, I got a box full of ones for the 16 by 13 actually already cut. I didn't have any cut for the 2-inch butcher blocks, so that's what we're doing right now. We'll glue it up today, and then tomorrow we'll go through and we will sand it, route it, and polish it so that way it'll be ready to go. So now we got to go over and cut to length. All right, so we got almost 13 inches of wood. He wants it 12 by 24. What I do is actually make it a little bit oversized. That way you can trim it and have room to trim to make sure that you've got really a good edge. And now it's going to be a matter of gluing it up and alternating the colors. So we end up using, I like Gorilla Glue. Gorilla Glue is great because it's an interior, exterior, it's not toxic, and it will hold that stuff together really, really well. So the next step is taking them and alternating the color patterns, gluing it up and clamping it overnight, and then tomorrow we'll be able to take it apart and run it through the thickness sander. If you're wondering, the reason I started making the cutting boards is over the years I've done so many projects with so many different types of wood that I had lots of little pieces here and there and everywhere, and I didn't want to waste them, so I started making a couple of cutting boards for a few people, and that ended up leading to more and more people seeing me making them and wanting to make more of them. So what will happen is, don't worry, these pieces of wood, because wood is so valuable right now, will be made into a smaller butcher block. So that's the reason why we have so many different sizes. So we're literally getting the beginning of 2 butcher blocks out of this. And this way, we're reusing. The first butcher block I actually made, when I built one of the first projects I had down in the country, it was a Pentecostal church built in 1903. And when we ended up going through, the roof line was so bad and sagging that we ended up taking it apart. But the timbers that were in there were actually oak. And I still have a few of those boards here. And I took some of them. I mean, they were literally 2 1/4 inches thick. Some of it was still rough sewn. And I used those to build a butcher block that I actually have in my kitchen still today, that's still used. And that's where I just have this saying of, I hate to waste stuff. And when you start seeing sheets of plywood at $82 a sheet, you start realizing, yeah, we can't afford to waste stuff. So let's get this glued up and on to the next step. Shuffling the deck, so to speak, trying to mix up the colors as much as possible, so that way we have a nice variance. Definitely don't want to go all in the same spot. Make sure that that is wide enough. Go with the tape measure. Oh, there it is. Yep, 12 3/4, and it'll be by 25. This is actually a little bit narrower than what I usually have. Usually I have them 16 inches, a little bit wider, but you know, it's up to the individual if they want a special size. The other thing I'm going to start doing, and I hadn't done it before, is doing the drip edge in there. I have never done that before, and I found out how you do it. Basically, you're going to make a guide that you'll end up going and running the router inside of it. And I figured out how I'm going to do it. I just have to get it all set up to do it. That's the great thing about woodworking, is you can find jigs to make things repeatable, and that's where it's sometimes easier to make 2 of something than it is to just make 1 because of the time. Now these are great. If you go to like the woodworking supply places, they have these glue spreaders here, which are plastic. The glue doesn't stick to them, so they're easy to clean, but then you kind of spread the glue with it instead of your fingers, because you want to make sure that the glue is spreading there evenly, that when you clamp it, it doesn't have the air pockets and things in there. You can see we put quite a bit of glue on here. Boom. And what I've done over here, and I need to get another roll, is I actually have a roll of paper that I can pull over here and use on the countertop. Funny thing is I never remember to use it, in which case I ended up with a lot of glue on my work surface. Great intentions, just not real bright. it's kind of funny as I'm sitting here healing up from knee surgery. I love history. The thing about history is, I always say, if you don't know where you're coming from, you don't know where you're going. And this is one of those cases where life is coming full circle. This knee that I had operated on yesterday, I had a flesh-eating bacteria back in Christmas of 1994. Had 3 knee operations to save my leg as well as my life, and spent about 6 months learning how to walk again. I'd lost a job that I really loved. I was unemployed, I was crippled, and I had, believe it or not, Michael and Michaela were 5 and 3 years old. And I ended up getting divorced. So I had 2 kids, no job, and a messed up leg. What saved me was I always had a love for woodworking and had always built projects and things for my mother. And I'd been doing carpentry work since I was like 8 years old when we put on additions to our house. And what I started being able to do at first, as I started to get back on my feet, much like I am right now, was doing a little bit of woodworking and odd jobs for people to make a few dollars to keep the bills paid. And that grew into me becoming the wood borer and a general contractor. So it's kind of funny that here I am, knee surgery, and I've come full circle. Kind of crazy. As they say, history repeats itself.